Hi, welcome back, everyone. Kevin Carpenter here, and today I'm with Phil Nash. We're getting ready for CppCon, just about a month out. How's it going today, Phil?
It's going pretty well here. Got 30 degrees Celsius here in the UK today.
Oh, 30 degrees. I would love 30 degrees instead of, low 40s.
Yeah, a lot
So,
of it going about.
so Phil is the original author of the C++ test framework Catch 2. He's an
Hmm.
independent trainer and consultant and a member of the standards committee. And you probably also know him as the co-host and producer for CppCast.
Yeah,
And so glad to have you to chat with you.
yeah, good to be here.
So my first question for you, CppCon's coming up. What talks are you excited to see? Or is there a speaker in particular you're looking forward to?
So, as usual, I've got a lot going on myself. I've got two talks to give and a class. So I've only recently just had a quick look through the schedule to see what's even going on. But the very first talk on the schedule, Diet McCall's creating a sender-receiver HTTP server, did particularly catch my eye because obviously senders receivers just made it into C++26, assuming it doesn't get pulled out again. And we had the recent CppCast episode on senders receivers. And some of the feedback we got was, how hard it was to understand just from that episode. And I actually made the comment, I'm sure we're going to start seeing talks on using senders receivers for actual practical applications. And here, the very first talk of the CppCon schedule is exactly that. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing how that turns out.
That'll be cool. That is one that I have on my list too, because a lot of my day job, we're doing a lot with HTTP, passing credit card transactions. So,
Yeah.
but to your point, as you mentioned, you have an academy class coming. I mean,
Yeah.
since you created Catch 2, I can't think of someone better to learn TDD training from. So tell me a bit about your class you're doing.
Yeah, so its full name is Accelerated TDD. So the idea being to try to accelerate you through the initial stages of learning and practicing TDD, where you make lots of mistakes, go down dead ends, and don't quite get it straight away. But if you try to actually start practicing TDD, in your day job, as soon as you think you understand it, that's when you're going to have problems because it's going to slow you down. You're not going to get the results you expected, and so many people just give up and say, no, it just doesn't work because I have that experience. So, the main remedy for that, of course, is to not do that and to actually do little, self-contained examples. We call them katas. You've probably heard of those. That you can practice TDD on until you get to a level of competency where that productivity comes back up, not just to where it was before, but even surpasses it. That's the whole point of doing it. And the idea of the course is to try to, get you off the path of some of those dead ends and get towards that productivity faster. So it's not going to completely eliminate that dip, but hope to accelerate you through it.
So I took the class with you back in 2018, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, Snakes and Ladders was,
Yep.
we kind of built the game out, and that was how I got my first introduction to TDD. How much has it changed for you since, with the way you do the class format now?
Yeah, I think that might be one of the, if not the first one, maybe the second year that I did it. And the material is largely the same. I'm constantly evolving it, and every year it changes a bit. I'd say this year it's probably changed the most since I started it, because now I'm actually going out and delivering this as a course at companies on site a lot more. So I wanted to keep it fresh and keep it more modular as well, so I can adapt it to different companies. So I've sort of broken it down in some different ways. But currently that Snakes and Ladders example, or Shoots and Ladders, I think you can call it in the States, that's still in there. That's still my first example. But then we sort of branch off in some different directions depending on which course I'm giving.
Well, I have to say that example, I had never done TDD, as I've said before, and that was a great example for getting into it because it just helped me adapt things. I was unfortunate that I missed the second day with you because that
Right.
was the part where I would have learned how to more quickly integrate TDD with existing projects, which
Yeah.
I'm sure you're covering a lot more of now too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's why we do it as a 2-day. In fact, I started doing it as a 3-day workshop. You might think that actually TDD, there's not actually that much to it. In fact, I've got like one slide that basically tells you the whole thing, and I explain it in a few minutes. But mastering it and actually, as you say, integrating with existing code bases, or what we call legacy code,
Yeah.
going by the Michael Feathers definition that legacy code is code without tests. That's that's really hard to work with if you're trying to create these completely sort of clean enclaves of code that you've written using TDD, or how to apply TDD to that sort of code base. So we spend quite a lot of time going over various different techniques, approaches, mindsets, everything, all the tools you're going to need to actually work effectively with legacy code, which is the title of Michael Feather's book, which we draw on a lot as well. So quite a lot of that, mostly on day 2, as you say, which you missed. So you need to come back this year. But
and actually, I have time this year, so I'm allowed to.
There you go.
So it's kind of funny because when I think about TDD with older code, or at least especially with some of the stuff I came across, the TDD, I mean, aside from being able to do the testing and have good form with the code, it's like I really find TDD helps me avoid coupling,
Yes.
where I find really tight coupling, because just the way that you end up doing it makes you think differently in general, and it's really helped code quality overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, that's the biggest win for TDD. It's not so much the testing itself. Sometimes the word test gets in the way. Obviously, you get a large body of tests as a result, which is great, but that's not everything. But the main thing is that it influences the way you design the code. If you put in the test first, then you're going to get the signals from the code when you're not designing it optimally, and that mostly involves coupling, as you say. So things that don't belong together, sticking together. Like Kevlin Henney uses this word adhesive code that sticks together, to contrast with cohesive code, where the things that belong together do go together, but if they don't belong together, then they are kept separate. It's such a simple idea, but when you're writing code, I mean, it never seems to come naturally. We have to really be disciplined and think about it, and then we still get it wrong. But with TDD, it sort of shines a light on that straight away. So it's actually harder to write code with heavy coupling than not, because those two things going hand in hand.
It really is, and that's across all languages. I mean, because whether it was Go or the amount of places I've applied your training has been wonderful. But aside from your training, as you said, you're going to be a busy man at CppCon, because you got 2 talks going on: modern C++ error handling, and then a back to basics on lifetime. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The error handling one, it's sort of another, not quite an evolution, more of a third step on a series that I started a few years ago. I did, let's see, what was it? Optional is not a failure was the first one on error handling, maybe around 2017. And then a year or 2 later, I did Dawn of a New Era. And I'm going to be revisiting a lot of the things that I talked about in those talks, but just with a bit of a different focus, and talk about what we can do today with the C++ that we have, particularly C++ 20 and 23, because they both bring some new things to the table there. But also revisiting, some of the older techniques, error codes, even, reference arguments, Boolean returns, but then, exceptions obviously do have a place. How do we distinguish between exceptions and optional and stood expected that we have now? What's the monadic interface that we have for those? What are its limitations? And what else we can do? But also, because another hot topic this year, and I look through the schedule and it comes up in lots of places, even though it's not actually in even C++ 26 yet, it's contracts.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need the language feature to have contracts in your code, though. In fact, all your code has contracts in it, but it's just a case of whether you make that explicit. But however you deal with contracts, there's an interplay there between contracts and error handling. And I think historically we've really blurred the lines. And I think now we're starting to get sort of greater clarity on where those boundaries are. But one thing I had not really seen talked about so much is where they actually overlap. And so there's like single bits of code that either has an error contract, or it has sort of runtime error handling. And usually we think of those as being distinct. So I'm going to present some techniques on how to deal with that as well.
Nice. And then object lifetime.
Yeah, well, this one, I wanted to do this because I did a couple of blog posts actually a couple of years ago. So it was when I was working at Sonar. So they're on the Sonar blog. And they're really about the rules of rule of 0, the rule of 5, of course the rule of 3. But then sort of going on to some of the more advanced stuff where you you actually sort of break away a little bit from that. And I think Peter Summerlad coined the rule of des demova. We'll explain all that, but it's where you can just define one. I think it's a. I'm actually struggling off the top of my head. There's one. I think it's just maybe the move constructor. You
Yeah.
define that as deleted, and then you get, just because of the way the defaults all work out, you get exactly
Okay.
the special member functions that you need, and that can be worth thinking about as well. But we go over all the different sort of categories of types, different types of managers, and shared and unique ownership models, all that sort of thing, and how they relate to the special member functions.
So not to bring Rust into the picture, but it is interesting because we've been learning it and using it at the company a little more, and it is interesting. I see lifetime differently now. Like
Right.
I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that talk, just because there are lots of ways that, managing our lifetime. I think especially as a new developer, you don't really. It wasn't something that was on my radar as much when I
Mm.
first started out in C++, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's something that we've had in the language since the beginning, really, and it's evolved over time. Obviously, we got the extra, the move semantics.
Yep.
We have things, to do with const and all these little wrinkles that have come along the way. But the basic idea has been there since the start.
Yeah.
It's a very rich language in terms of what you can express, different ways you can do it, and that adds a lot of complexity that you have to deal with.
Right.
And so it's an interesting back to basics talk, because we're talking about something which can be quite tricky to grasp,
Mm-hmm.
but it really is something that everyone has to master, because if you get
Yeah.
it wrong, it can be quite disastrous.
Yeah, that it can. Well, Phil, I want to thank you for your time, and I want to make sure everybody knows that you need to sign up for Phil's TDD class, Accelerated TDD.
Absolutely.
It's September 14th and 15th, so it's a
That sounds
pre-class.
right. Yeah. Yes.
So before the
Yeah.
conference starts, and still plenty of time to get signed up.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
before the conference, before you're too exhausted from the conference itself, seems to be the best time to take on these new ideas.
yeah, I was going to say, I took it as a post, and I was pretty burnt by the
Yeah.
time. You really get loaded at the conference. Make sure you build in breaks when you're at the conference. That's for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I look forward to seeing you in Aurora.
See you then.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Phil.
Thanks, Kevin.